computer crime has a lot of really interesting facets to it. Okay, the first is that it allows anonymous communication, right? Obviously, you know who I am because A, I introduced myself, and B, there's video of me that you're watching right now. But if I go on, Reddit, I can create a user profile that has little to no link to my actual life, and then post whatever I want, and nobody will know that it's me, Kevin Jennings, doing that posting. They can only see my username. There are boards where you don't even get a username. It's just completely anonymous. The most obvious example being 4chan, which if you have not been to 4chan, don't go to 4chan. It is, you remember the in the original Star Wars where Obi-Wan's like, wretched hive of scum and villainy. And that was a terrible accent, I know. Don't email me about that. But the wretched hive of scum and villainy thing, he was wrong. It's not Mos Eisley, it's 4chan. But you can post completely anonymously there. You don't even have to have a username. And that gives people a certain security that makes people act differently. I've noticed it myself. When I am on a web page where I have an anonymous username, I act differently than I do on, say, Facebook, where my actual name is linked to my comments. Okay? So that anonymity changes people's behavior. Sometimes for the better, but most of the time for the worse. Okay? Another interesting facet of computer crime is the dark web. Okay? The dark web is, we'll get into this a lot more later on in the semester, but in essence, the dark web is a special section of the global internet that is not indexed by search engines like Google, and you need special technology to access it, like Tor, which we'll talk about Tor in a bit. But that, not only is that anonymous, but it's also hides your identity even from more sources than, say, Reddit does. Okay, so Reddit, the server, the people who run Reddit can link your username to your real life personage based on your IP address. Okay, and we'll talk exactly about what exactly an IP address is later. But on the dark web, they can't. Okay, because the Tor, the service that you have to use to access the dark web, anonymizes that using a proxy, which is really cool. But there's a lot of criminal activity that goes on there because of that enforced inability for anybody to know who anybody else is. Okay, and we'll talk more about the dark web in later chapters. Another interesting facet of computer crime is Bitcoin. Bitcoin exploded not too long ago, and now it's in the process of crashing. But it's essentially a cryptocurrency, meaning that it has no physical aspect to it. It's not like gold or, say, a US dollar where like I can touch it and hold it. A cryptocurrency is just kind of a series of numbers that exist only on the internet, but it has value, just like, a stock in a company has value. And that value goes up and down compared to other things of value like the US dollar. So at one point at its height, Bitcoin was worth right about $20,000. The exchange rate was about 20,000 US dollars for one Bitcoin. As I'm recording this, it's much, much lower than that. It's like $3,000 or $4,000 for one Bitcoin. And when you're watching this, it might have gone up, it might have gone back down. That's the nature of how these things work. But Bitcoin and those other cryptocurrencies, criminals love using those as a means of exchange because they are they're much, much, much harder to trace as a means of exchange compared to US dollars or Japanese yen or whatever other kind of currency you want to use. Some cryptocurrencies are even harder to trace than Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a really popular one, but there are many others, and some of them have kind of additional built-in let's hide the identity of who owns these coins and where they're going and all these things, which makes it much easier for criminals to accept payment for services or products or whatever, without law enforcement being able to use the money trail to track them down. Okay?